All right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome back. I see we have several people in the live chat already. Neat. Welcome all. Okay. Well, today is going to be a fun show. We're watching our favorite AIG idiot again, Calvin Smith, and joining me to do that is Peter, my host and co-host. Welcome. You're muted. In the meantime, can everyone hear me? Can you guys all hear me out there? It also looks like the bees are attacking Peter again. Let's see. We got Icarus, Ian. Oh, hey there, Peter. There you are. Ian Chen Official, Jamie E, Vandali 1998, Ian Debunked, and Trail Mix. Hi guys, welcome. Oh,
Okay.
sorry, Ian. I did not read it before we started. I read it like right as we were going live. My bad. Alex Markel, hello. We can hear you. Perfect. All right, awesome. Okay,
Yeah.
well,
If
Nestlig
if
currently is MIA doing real world stuff. He might join us. We'll see.
if everything's
Do what?
okay, then the people in the chat should also be able to hear me because you heard me, but the people in chat didn't. But I
Okay.
hope I have that fixed now.
Oh, and we have Dragon Spartan 90 officials, Sage Ohio, and Smitty. Hello, all who are joining us. Welcome. So, alrighty. Yeah. So, Nestlig is busy doing real world things. He may show up, he may not. That's okay. We're all busy, always doing real world stuff. It's so much fun in the real world. My real
It
world
is.
stuff has finally calmed down a little bit. I say precariously. Probably shouldn't say that.
I tuned in on a live show of Natalia Reagan last night, and you know how I am. I said if you need help with live streaming, so I might be busy in real life making more artwork.
Natalia, who's that
Reagan.
again?
Natalia Reagan. She's probably one of the funniest science communicators I've ever seen.
Oh, I think you have mentioned her before.
Yes. And
is she like neuroscience?
She's an anthropologist.
Okay.
And at least I don't think if she has a degree or not, but she's also somewhat of a primatologist.
Okay.
And she sets up all kinds of cool trips because they're now going to the Galapagos to visit Darwin's footsteps, stuff like that.
I would love to go to the Galapagos, but on my salary, I don't know. Oh, DM speciation isn't macroevolution wing. Yeah.
No, he's not here. He's not here.
Who? Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep, he's not here.
You gave it away.
Yeah, I'd love to go to the. I'd love to go to the Galapagos. The interesting thing about the Galapagos is, well, so of course you have to fly into Ecuador first, and then there are two airports in the Galapagos. One is a former U.S. military base, and the other was more recently constructed. And so you then bounce from Ecuador to one of those airports, and you basically have to be accompanied by like wildlife and fishery officials, whatever you want to call them, who, you know, anytime you go out, essentially, because most of the Galapagos is like nature reserves. So you have to be accompanied by a guide anytime you're going out into, you know, the bush. You have to. Otherwise you're like illegally trespassing on on protected territory. But I'd love to go see it. You know, I'd love to see the birds and the tortoises and iguanas and all that. Oh, and Jake Nelson, hello.
Yeah, I'd love to go on one of those trips myself, but for me it's even more difficult because I have to get to the US first. And then,
you know, Peter, we should have gone during COVID because flights were like nothing. We should have just gotten all together and flown down to to the Galapagos together.
Yeah. Oh, well.
So you can't sneak pregnant cats onto the island, says Smitty. Well, there are cats already. There are cats already. And Zach. Hello, Zach. Oh, Zach, if you want to join us, feel free. We'd love to have you.
You may have to shoot him a link if that's the case.
That's true. Yeah, if he's interested. Yeah. There are cats. Goats have been released on the islands. Dogs have been released on the islands. Lots of probably boars too. I wouldn't be surprised. We release boars everywhere we go, for God's sakes. Yeah, just all sorts of animals that have wrecked the local flora and fauna. And so then,
I mean, dogs are known to ruin live streams as well, both mine and Arn's. And fun fact, Arn's going to get a new dog. There's going to be 4.
Does he need a new dog?
No. But he was told
so many animals.
He was told he needed another one.
Yeah. So, well.
Then you get another one. That's how that works.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's real sad how much destruction has been wrought by animals on the Galapagos. How much destruction non-native animals have wrought on the Galapagos, I should say. Anyway, so let's see. Last week we watched a video by Calvin Smith over at AIG, in which gotcha. That's understandable, Zach. In which Calvin Smith said that dead fish don't sink, which is hilarious, I guess. I mean, it's hilarious and it's sad. It's like the idea that he has, debunked this probably like a century old now, at least, idea of how, fish fossilization occurs with, but I went out to the dock and I saw that there were fish out there that weren't sinking.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. I mean, yeah, for the 5 minutes you probably looked at them, they probably didn't sink. But I work in an aquarium, and when fish die, a lot of times they just tend to sink. They just don't even float at all because their swim bladder has been punctured before they die. So,
but
that was fun and stupid.
Keep in mind, these are the people who will tell you that clams are found in the lower layers in the fossil record because they're closer to the bottom, and thus they would be in the lower layers. Hence, they show up on, what was it, Mount Everest?
Well,
the bottom layers,
be an interesting prediction. Right, yeah. Well, and the funny thing is that could be a prediction. Like, creationists could, in theory, make predictions about where to find certain fossils, based either on hydrologic sorting or their weird, the biological provinces idea or whatever. They could, in theory, make these predictions. And some of the upper people at like AIG and ICR do kind of make predictions sometimes, but most of the time they won't. They will avoid, like the plague, making any predictions at all, because if they make a prediction, it could be potentially falsified. And if it's falsified, then they're wrong, and they can't have that. So
I found a new kryptonite. I tested it out on 2 young Earth creationists on Twitter. They told me that evolution was fake, and all I did was say, okay, then list me the created kinds, the original created kinds from 6,000 years ago, and tell me where to find them in the fossil record. Crickets. Never heard of anything again. That they won't even respond anymore.
That's sort of like what RJ says with his reptile mammal transition, when he says list out the reptile to mammal created kinds.
RJ responded in one of those threads.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. He said, you're not going to get an answer. I said, I know I'm not going to get an answer, but it's worth a try, right?
It's for the same reason that, you can't ask creationists how many moss kinds are there, how many fern kinds. If it's not barnyard animals, they really don't care. And in many cases, they just quite literally don't know anything about biodiversity, and so they can't answer you for that reason either. So,
I recently rewatched a chat that Arn had, and I'm still thinking of trying to get that guy on my channel. He was complaining about chiclets, which is basically your field, right? So there were chiclets found in what was it, Great Lake in Africa, that has he said a couple of hundred species. And the lake was and the lake was isolated. And then he went on and saying that he quoted some evolutionary biologist and said that isolation is key to speciation. And
I mean, yeah, it's a large part of it.
While listing several forms like allopatric and sympatric speciation, which was funny. And then Arn asked him what those were, because wasn't it sympatric where you can have a species developing within another species, but there's no separation whatsoever?
Right. Yeah, you have a new species developing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So he used the words.
Yeah.
He knew that it was possible, and still said, "Well."
Well, I mean, so what I think you're thinking about. Oh, Vandalia 1998 for $1.99 says, "Could your new book be a Christmas gift this year?" The Rocks for Their Volume 2 is not going to be finished before Christmas. I hate to break it to you guys. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. You could buy Volume 1 as a Christmas gift. We are working on Volume 2, though. So rest assured, we're working on it. It's not ready yet. I've had so many things on my plate that now I have a little bit of breathing room. So there's that. I haven't even recorded the Leafy Sea Dragon's Tale yet. We have the script finished and it's been edited and everything, so it's ready. I just haven't recorded it. I also just finished a new script for Professor Dave, so that should be fun coming out soon. But like I said, I've just been so busy, no breathing room for anything.
Oh wait.
The thing, what I think you're
now I'm getting criticized. Alex Markel.
What?
I mean, I'm Dutch.
Oh, cichlid.
I'm not. Yeah. Well,
yeah.
He pronounced it chiclets.
I kept thinking, like, I was like, isn't that a candy? Chiclets?
It's a gum. If I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right. But yeah, cichlids. Well, that's how I say it. Or some people say kicklids, which I've heard that pronunciation before too. There are lots of different ways to pronounce names.
In Dutch, it begins with ch, with the ch sound. So
yeah,
that's probably.
Well, that's okay. I mean, like I said, there are lots of different ways to pronounce names. I say Bisher. Some people say Bashir. Some people say Biker. Lots of different ways to pronounce it. Yeah.
Let the fish come to me and complain.
Oh,
that's what I want
Eddie
to see.
McCoy is now a bacteria member. Well, welcome to the gang. Thank you for joining. Yeah, what I think you're thinking of is like Lake Victoria. So Lake Victoria has
that was it.
Somewhere between 400 and 600 species of cichlids, depending on who's counting. There's a bit of debate there. And basically what happened was within the last like 100,000 years or so, the lake became isolated probably multiple times. So basically it would lower. So the lake's way up here right now, but it would dry out and lower, and then there would be like smaller lakes, little lakelets, whatever, that would have separate populations of cichlids. And then when the lake would rise up again, these populations could once again,
there was separation.
Yeah, so they would be separated into these little isolated populations, and then when the lake would refill, they would come back into contact with each other, but they would be effectively separate species now because they've been isolated for so long. And so then they were their own species. And it did that up and down, back and forth many times over in the... Dad, you're not my dad. But anyway, so Actually, you say that. I really can't. My facial hair is not very good. As you can see right here. If I can do. Yeah, there you go. Or other way. There you go. Right
Yeah.
there. So that right there is not. It does not come in on either side. I hate it. It's very annoying. Very frustrating. I basically have to do a comb over with my hair. It's like can't look even.
Well,
Anyways,
if you ever go into the army, Jackson, that'll help. That's where the gas mask fits, right? So that needs to be closed off. So you're prepared for Armageddon.
That I guess that's
and the rapture.
That's
and
true.
Such.
Isn't that why a certain someone who's famous for a trapezoidal mustache shaved his large handlebar mustache originally? Was
toothbrush,
put the gas mask over it?
Toothbrush mustache, yeah.
Yeah, I think The
guy famously killed Hitler. The guy we're talking about.
That's true. That's true. He sure did do that.
Yeah.
What a guy. Anyway, okay. So, Calvin Smith. Let's see what the biggest flaw in evolution is that Calvin Smith is going to expose for us.
Yeah, big is a good thing to say with this. Okay, let's see. They forgot the first few seconds of video, but they had sound. I checked. It's in the original as well. First few seconds, no video.
Ruh-roh.
There you go.
Dun dun dun.
There you go. Bigfoot hunt. That was him. Do you see him? He's following
that was the
Calvin.
best footage you've ever gotten on Bigfoot.
He's following Calvin.
Get out of there, Calvin! Run! Get out of there!
And I do have to remember this guy's name, but it's probably the guy who they modeled the giant off of in the Ark Encounter. What was it? Christians thrown in front of the dinosaur exhibition in some kind of Roman theater. There's this big guy. I shouldn't say it, but he has a little bit of a lisp, and he works for Answers in Genesis off and on. He would make a good Bigfoot, by the way. Maybe it's him. We don't know.
I don't know. Calvin's right behind you.
I didn't say. Did Bigfoot wear slippers, or did I see that wrong? We'll have to see.
Wait, I don't know. Go back. I didn't see it.
You want me to go back?
Sure. I don't know. I didn't see it.
I think he did.
Is he wearing slippers? He might be wearing slippers. Uh-oh, we lost our background, though.
Well, Hold on. You see that? You see the heel?
Bad.
You see the heel on the back foot?
No, Peter, that's just Bigfoot just has very large heels. That's it. Yeah.
He's wearing flip-flops. Bigfoot with flip-flops. I mean, yeah. That I can get behind that.
Calvin Smith, he's right behind you. Look out.
When asking for evidence to support the story of evolution, one common answer is an appeal to the fossil record. Many evolution believers seem to take an eye-rolling, well, everybody knows approach and assume fossils provide strong evidence for evolution. So commonplace is the idea, and so commonplace are many in this belief, atheists will sometimes wear t-shirts bearing the phrase, "We have the fossils, we win," almost as if they believe fossils themselves are proof of their naturalistic story of origins.
I mean, I haven't seen that, but all right,
that what Charles Darwin himself considered the weakest link in his entire naturalistic hypothesis, the lack of fossil evidence, has never been overcome. Darwin asked a question, then made an admission and a statement, all in one quote that some...
Wait, no, okay, first of all, I mean, it could be the case that fossil evidence was to Charles Darwin the weakest link. That's entirely possible. That doesn't mean anything about the Okay, one, that doesn't mean anything about the validity of evolution, and two, that doesn't mean anything about the validity of the fossil data. Saying, well, fossils are weak evidence. Well, no, they aren't weak evidence, but if you say they are the weakest of the evidence, that doesn't really mean anything. I would agree. I mean, I think you could say genetics is the strongest evidence in favor of evolution, and Richard Dawkins has famously said, we don't need a single fossil to vindicate evolution, right? That's what he said. And creationists often misunderstand what he meant by that. What he meant by that was the evidence from genetics and morphology and biogeography is sufficient to generate the phylogeny of life. You don't necessarily need fossils, but it's cool that we have fossils. It's really neat. We can see the actual stages that evolution went through. Fossils are the prima facie evidence of evolution, right? I mean, that's literally what fossils are. So this is just silly. Also, Darwin became more impressed with the fossil evidence as time went on. If you read multiple versions of Origin of Species, there were 6 versions, and by the 6th version, the last version, Darwin had a number of different transitional forms that he marshaled in Origin of Species. So, like, I'm drawing a blank. Like Dorodon and Basilosaurus, which were early whales. So they still had the hind limbs in them. They weren't totally reduced like they are in modern whales. There was also um, the Halotherium, which is an early manatee, also still has the hind legs. There's Stegodon, which is an earlier elephantid, so it's not quite as derived as modern elephants, but it also wasn't quite as primitive as Mastodon. Archaeopteryx and Compsognathus, Darwin used those and was like, hey, look, this shows that birds have a link to reptiles, which makes perfect sense. And so, yeah, this is nonsense. Just nonsense. Anyway, we can keep going.
The problem up perfectly. Why then is not every geological formation and every stratum full of such intermediate links? Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic chain, and this, perhaps, is the most obvious and serious objection which can be urged against the theory. As an analogy, just like the...
Pause. Okay, so yes, he did say that, but again, he also offered an explanation in the next sentence as to why that would be the case. And Darwin's explanation for why there are so few, or why in his day there were so few fossils known. Obviously, we have many, many, many thousands more now. But in his day, and I mean, his explanation is still valid. The explanation is that most organisms, whatever fossils they leave behind, get eroded, even if they manage to leave behind fossils at all. Darwin recognized that most organisms don't leave fossils. Like soft-bodied organisms are very, very unlikely to leave behind fossils. You have to have what are called Lagerstätten, which are very, very, very well preserved fossil or strata. So basically, you get things like like the feathers of Archaeopteryx are preserved in a Lagerstätten. It's actually a specific type of Lagerstätten called a Plattenkalk. That's the Solnhofen limestone in Germany. Or like the Ediacara Hills in Australia, which preserve late Precambrian invertebrates. So things like Charnia, Dickinsonia, Kimberella. These are all soft-bodied, and you wouldn't have them except for the fact that it's a very specific type of sediment. Okay, Zach is saying, predicting we hear punctuated equilibrium very soon. All right. We have a prediction. Okay. And also, I do want to point out, for some organisms, we do actually have very, very good graduated chains of species. Change is a bad word, but we have like series of species. And these are things like foraminifera, diatoms, radiolarians, conodonts, ammonites, lots of invertebrates and unicellular eukaryotes that have very tough parts like shells or tests are exquisitely preserved in the fossil record. Chesapecten is a famous scallop from from the Chesapeake area, and it has this amazing fossil record where you have like one species at the bottom, or one species at the bottom, and then as you go up, it gradually evolves into a new species. You have that sort of stuff all over the place, especially for invertebrates. But creationists almost never talk about invertebrates because, again, they're not barnyard animals. Creationists are not really interested in them, so that's why. We can keep going.
Legendary Bigfoot, which is often touted as seen by some, and yet which can never actually be confirmed and proven unequivocally by science. The so-called missing links are just that, still missing. And although there's a constantly proposed handful of high-profile candidates which come and go, such as Archaeopteryx, Pachycetus, or Tiktaalik, they are all highly disputed, even with...
Pause. They're highly disputed by who? What do you mean? Archaeopteryx is at the base of Aviale, which is the clade that includes extant birds and extinct birds. It's sister to the other paraves, which is either Dromaeosauridae or Troodontidae. I can't remember which one it is. Dapper would know. I'm sure he'll beat me up for it later. But the fact that Archaeopteryx is at the very base of the Aviale tree is indisputable at this point. I don't know what you mean. Like legitimately, it has a bony tail. It has teeth. It has unfused wing fingers. These are all characteristics that modern birds do not have. Yeah, in what sense did any of those come and go? Yeah, I don't know what he means by that. I don't know what that means. Pachycetus, again, indisputably at the base of the cetacean tree, because it has a diagnostic astragalus ankle bone, which it looks exactly like that of all other artiodactyls, the even-hoofed mammals. But it also has an involucrum, which is diagnostic of cetaceans. There are no other clades of mammals or animals that have an involucrum that is diagnostic of cetacean, or that has this characteristic which is in the same shape as that of cetaceans. So that's just nonsense. Tiktaalik, again, has a humerus, radius, ulna, just like all Sarcopterygians. All Sarcopterygians have these characteristics, like bar none. I mean, what do you mean? And its characteristics place it intermediate between like the more derived Acanthostega and the less derived Panderichthes. Actually, we have Parmastega now too, which is intermediate between Tiktaalik and Acanthostega, because fossils just keep rolling in. So when he says these fossils come and go, I genuinely don't know what he means by that. Like, these fossils really haven't changed their position all that much, at least in the last decade or so. So I don't know what he means.
But, yeah, it's also a good sign when you've got fossils where creationists are fighting what it is. Some say that Tiktaalik was just an amphibian, and the creationists will say it is a fish, clearly a fish. So yeah, that's a good sign of a transitional fossil.
And Tiktaalik obviously spent most of its time in the water, based on its morphology. It was clearly more. It could move around on land, in the same sense that like mudskippers can move around on land, but it was not totally adapted for spending most of its time on land. So mudskippers actually outpace it in land maneuverability. So Tiktaalik would have spent more time in water compared to like mudskippers, for instance. So yeah, no, I don't know. I don't know what he means by this. This is just nonsense.
Okay.
Within the evolutionary community of scientists themselves.
Citation, please?
Of course, many evolutionists will blow off that quite damning quote from the 1800s as no more than a vestigial comment from the past when...
Pause. Is he serious? Like, did he really say that with a straight face? That modern scientists will blow off a quote from the 1800s? Did he really just say that with a straight face? Yeah, we're going to blow things off from 200 years ago because we've moved on in 200 years. Are you serious? Well, okay. In fairness to Calvin, his favorite book is 2,000 years old. So I guess...
And it doesn't change,
I guess
Jackson.
he's not...
Does not
it doesn't
change. Even
not
when new
change.
evidence
Right.
comes in refuting everything it says, it still doesn't change. And I'm completely baffled because what is he? He's camping on his own. What is he going to eat?
Yes, CRISPR, that is Bigfoot in the background. You are correct.
Yeah.
I mean, Kent Hovind regularly pulls from books that are a century old. So maybe for Calvin, 200 years old, that's pretty recent compared to what he's used to.
I honestly don't know who's worse, Kent Hovind or Calvin here, because I've heard Calvin say some pretty stupid stuff while he was at CMI.
Yeah,
but
they all say pretty silly things.
Yeah, and so if people who don't know Calvin look up some older videos from CMI, he was basically the yes and amen guy in their video show. The other guy did the talking, and he was just there to just repeat what was just said and confirming
a potted plant.
Yeah, yeah. Ultimately stupid
silliness.
Okay, let's see if Bigfoot hits him on the head or something, and good
ends our suffering. Yeah.
Evolution was in its infancy, assuming it's all been worked out now. Yet, despite the
I did not know that Bigfoot has an outhouse. Did you see that in the background? I mean,
he has an outhouse.
Yeah. Yes. Did you see it? I mean, I
didn't. Well, maybe when the camera turns back around, I don't know.
Okay.
Oh, I do see it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess you're right.
As no more than a vestigial comment from the past when
he's
evolution
going to
was in its infancy, assuming it's all been worked out now.
See that?
Yet, despite the bluff and bluster many evolutionists offer, one of the most prominent of their own picked up on the same problem and went public with it, causing quite a stir in the evolutionary community during the 1970s and 1980s, 100 years after Charles Darwin. No less than the eminent American Harvard professor, Stephen Jay Gould, paleontologist, evolutionary biologist, and historian of science, spilled the beans in spectacular fashion when he began questioning the very same fossil record evolutionists and atheists like himself were parading as proof positive for evolution, and more specifically, a reason to reject.
You see. Sorry.
Yeah, I saw him.
I have attention deficit syndrome. When I see something, I can't keep my eyes off it. But there are not a lot of funny creationist videos. This one
was a little funny.
This was funny.
Yeah. No, you're right. The creationists in general, and especially like Islamic creationists, are just so boring. Oh my goodness. Islamic creationists are the worst. Gould was a commie. He actually has a quote in I think it's the paper where he and Gould rolled out punctuated equilibrium for the first time, in which he says he learned about like his dad read the manifesto to him when he was a kid. So yeah, I think so. He was a comrade. He was a good old comrade. Which is cool, by the way. Everyone should be comrades. We should all be comrades together, my fellow comrades.
Excellent. It doesn't work that way. I have the Bible read to me twice a week. I'm not a Christian. So people can read stuff to you. It doesn't automatically. Never mind.
Look, Zach came in clutch for me. Wrote in 1777 that he learned his Marxism at Daddy's knee. Yeah. I think that was the first paper. Yeah. So yes. Okay. So in all seriousness, though, what is Calvin saying here? Well, it's basically a bunch of lies. Gould was not disputing there aren't a lot of intentionally funny creationist videos.
Yeah,
that's true, Christopher.
That's exactly
true.
what I meant. That's what I meant.
Like Michael Behe getting shooed away by the mechanic. That's pretty funny, but that's not intentionally funny, you know. or the chemist, engineer, midwife being like, I'm gonna build a like have a ranch to capture pterosaurs. You know, that's unintentionally funny.
He had a fenced off field, which he
Right,
rented, and he had 3 guys who were there guarding it 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had a small pig and a goat and a bucket full of blood and I forgot what is it that koalas eat?
Eucalyptus
and a car and cameras and so the fence had to be built, and all of that for $5,000. I mean, that's cheap.
The bucket of blood is really what gets me. I love that his idea that he thinks like, yeah, pterosaurs were vampires. That's so real.
They would fly in, and they couldn't take off anymore because now they were fenced in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I still feel so sad. I missed every single invite that I got to talk to him before he passed away, and it always came happens right after I went to bed because it was never on the same time. I would so have loved to have this guy on my channel for a chat.
Hilarious.
That would have been
hilarious. Yeah.
And I wish we would have seen the video when the whole setup was finished. We didn't even see that.
Right. Yeah. Well, at any rate, so Gould and Stephen Jay Gould and Niles Eldredge came up with punctuated equilibrium to address what they thought was, well, it was in part this. What they thought in part was an issue with the way that other evolutionary biologists presented the process of evolution. They were not arguing that the fossil record did not support evolution, despite creationists' favorite quote mines, and Gould was aware of these quote mines, and one of my favorite quotes from him was something to the effect of I keep getting quoted, whether through stupidity or ignorance, I don't know, by creationists as saying there are no transitional fossils. That's not true. It's just really funny. But of course, creationists don't ever show you that one because, it calls them stupid. But the point of it is that punctuated equilibrium was not invented to address like a lack of transitional fossils. This is a bald-faced lie that has been repeated for decades. It's never going to be true. There is never any evidence anywhere ever that supports this lie. Read their papers. I've read like 3 or 4 of the Gould and Eldredge papers on punctuated equilibrium. There is zero evidence that they think that. I've read ever since Darwin. I've read Wonderful Life. I've read a lot of Gould's work. There is no evidence anywhere that he ever said that just there are no transitional fossils, so we have to come up with some new idea to explain that. It just didn't happen. It's a fantasy. It's a fairy tale that creationists have invented. Punctuated equilibrium is, in some sense, part of it. I know Zach is here, and if I don't say this correctly, I'm going to get called out. Justifiably. So I want to be correct. Because Zach has written a very good paper on punctuated equilibrium and how it's been perceived, and parts of it have been rebutted over the years. So, for instance, part of the problem is merely that Gould and Eldredge tried to present their theory as more novel than it was. And Dawkins talks about this in The Blind Watchmaker. He has a chapter titled Puncturing Punctuationism. His issue is not with punctuated equilibrium, at least not most of it. Because punctuated equilibrium tends to explain speciation in the fossil record as you have a population in one area, and then if you go up in the column, you see, well, suddenly there's a new species. Where the heck did it come from? Now, maybe the fossil record is just so poor that we have no evidence that of that transitional period. So we just see the old species and now the new species, or perhaps, right? Gould called it a Kuhnian revolution, right? So, to Gould, one explanation for why we have this new species where we formerly had, this old species was maybe the fossil record is just super imperfect and it didn't preserve that intermediate period. Oh, okay, it's possible, certainly possible. Or perhaps if allopatric speciation is true, then you have this original population which separated and now has gone to a new area. So we should be searching for the transitional forms between the old and the new species elsewhere in a different range. And now Gould did in fact test this idea on a snail. I think it was called Poecilionides zonatus or something like that. It was a snail in the Bahamas, and the fossil record of the snail did seem, at least to Gould, in Gould's mind, to demonstrate this. Now, inherently, there's no problem with that, right? Allopatric speciation happens, and it makes sense that populations move, then they come into secondary contact with each other after they've speciated, and then you have niche partitioning. So you have selection for the new and the old species to diverge in their niches, such that they no longer compete with each other. That's all well and good, very totally normal evolutionary biology. There is no argument about any of that whatsoever, right? That's fine. That's perfectly fine. The part of the problem was, for instance, Gould imagined that, and Eldridge also imagined that when this population moved away, it was usually a very small population. So you have this bottleneck, and that bottleneck would allow what were formerly very rare genotypes, like large inversions or translocations, things like this, to then they would get a better chance to be preserved in the population as a result of bottleneck effect and genetic drift. And so then this could cause major evolutionary change. Now, yes and no. If you read like Jerry Coyne and Alan Orr's book, Speciation, they point out that this bottlenecking effect is really not necessary for speciation. You can have speciation perfectly fine without a bottleneck. You don't have to have it. Also, large genetic events are not necessary to get new species. It can happen, certainly. I mean, one of my favorite examples is when talking about speciation is the marbled crawfish, which had a genome duplication. So it happens. Inversions happen, translocations happen, all these things happen, but they are not the primary means by which speciation occurs. And so I guess sort of double back. This has nothing to do with saying that there are holes in the fossil record. That's not what Gould was saying, or what Gould and Eldridge were saying. They were just saying that the tempo and mode of evolution that evolutionary biologists typically use was not always correct. Now, they said gradualism is fine. Gould argued for pluralism. Him and Eldridge did in their first paper. So this has nothing to do with throwing out gradualism. Has nothing to do with shoring up the holes in the fossil record. Gould and Eldridge relied on Mayer's idea of genetic revolutions. Of course, none of those three were geneticists, says Zach. So in essence, most of what Gould said was fine, was not crazy, was not like out of the ordinary, and the little bit that was kind of on the fringes has largely been kind of pulled out since then, and there's no problem. Like there just is no problem anymore. This is silly. Sorry, I've rambled long enough. We can go back. We can start watching.
Reject the Creator God and His written revelation to humanity, the Bible. As one of the most influential and widely read authors of popular science of his generation, a self-confessed atheistic Marxist and one of the world's foremost evolutionists. Gould could not be described by anyone in the evolutionary community as coming from a biased creationist viewpoint when he offered his honest and expert assessment of the fossil record with statements like the following. The extreme rarity of transitional forms in the fossil record persists as the trade secret of paleontology. To preserve our favorite account of evolution by natural selection, we view our data as so bad that we never see the very process we profess to study.
Pause. Okay, so again, as I just said, Gould was arguing against gradualism. So he was arguing against phyletic gradualism, the idea that all speciation is through this inexorable, very gradual, slow, mutational process. And phyletic gradualism is fine. It's fine. We know that species arise as a result of phyletic gradualism. We know this both from the fossil record and from experiments and phylogenies. Like, this isn't a question. We know this is true. There are so many ways to confirm this. If you take Donald Prothero's book, Evolution: What the Fossils Say and Why It Matters, my favorite chapter in that book is actually about invertebrates, because if you look at like foraminifera, and you can see how they've so gradually changed as you go up through the fossil record. That's gradualism. That's not punctuated equilibrium. But regardless, what Gould is talking about in that quote, when he says transitional fossils, what he is saying specifically is transitions between species, not between genera or families or orders. He means specifically between species. And again, Gould and Eldred said that over and over and over in their papers, because a lot of their work was misconstrued. They deflected some criticism of their work, justifiably, I think, by pointing out that people were attacking them for, basically, people were pointing out the wrong things. They were saying, "Oh, well, we're not talking about, changes at the genus level or the level of orders or whatever. We're talking about species level changes. So population splitting to form new species. That's the level at which this process is occurring." And so when you talk about transitional forms like Archaeopteryx, we're not talking about the transition between like the species before and after Archaeopteryx, right? We're talking about speciation between we're talking about transitions between like two different like families or orders of animals, right? That's what we're talking about. The Archaeopteryx representing a transition that is way more or way less like graded than something like a radiolarian or a diatom, right? Because vertebrates just have a worse fossil record than phytoplankton do. They just have a worse fossil record. Just, it happens. Anyway, so Zach points out that Gould and Eldridge's biggest blunder is that their claim that cladogenesis is always more important than anagenesis. Okay, interesting. Okay, we can keep going.
Gould's atheistic ideology wouldn't allow him to accept the concept of Genesis creation and the corresponding biblical flood as the far better explanation of the fossil record. So he gave up on gradualistic theories of evolution in favor of what he and a colleague, Niles Eldredge, also a well-known and respected biologist and paleontologist, referred to as punctuated equilibrium. This new story of evolution conceded to the reality of the lack of any visible graduated chain of fossils that support the idea of evolution happening slowly over millions of years. But rather than admitting this lack was problematic for the evolutionary narrative, it asserted that evolution happened quickly over millions of years, in sudden bursts that occurred periodically.
Okay, again, when we say quickly, we're talking about tens to hundreds of thousands of years to like a million years. That's what we mean by quickly. Okay? Just bear that in mind. He's talking about hundreds of thousands of years and calling that quickly. It is worth pointing out that speciation tends to take longer when it's allopatric compared to when it's sympatric. And the reason for that is when two populations are like splitting, there's not a an impetus for them to diverge a whole lot in their ecology when they're when they're allopatric, when they're in separate locations. But once they come back into contact with each other again secondarily later, then there is, and that's to avoid competing for the same resources. So then you have, as I said earlier, you have niche partitioning or niche differentiation, whichever one you want to call it. And this is natural selection driving these two populations very rapidly in opposite directions. In fact, you can see that we did the narrowmouth's tail a little while back, and we talked about this because there are two species of narrowmouth toad. There's one in Arizona, and then there's one in Florida. The song of the narrowmouth frogs in Arizona and Florida are rather similar to each other. They're quite similar, but the closer you get to their intersection, where the two species meet, which is in Oklahoma, the songs of the two species get more and more and more different. And the reason for that is the frogs are avoiding interbreeding with each other by accident. So the songs get very different the closer they are, and the farther apart they are, the more similar their songs can be because there isn't that pressure there. Needless to say, none of this is weird or unusual.
One thing is
creationists just don't understand punctuated equilibrium.
One thing is, and Smitty pointed it out, they found the Jurassic Park logo buried in the sand. I love the contrast. That thing. I mean,
yeah.
And how it's buried in sand.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Calvin didn't have a lot. He didn't bring a lot of gear with him, so you really can't dig much farther down than the sand. So,
No.
You got to do with what you have.
That's correct. And they don't have a lot of money. I mean, art costs a lot of money, so not a lot left. So. By the way, if I am a little off, my dog is attacking me again. So I'm happy. See, I'm not lying. I'm not quiet.
We believe you.
Why always on Thursdays? Always this time. It's weird. Okay, let's hurry back to the video.
Okay.
Throughout the supposed long ages. And this was the proposed reason why the fossil record looked the way it did, as if each kind of creature appeared fully formed. Gould's idea was that evolution took place so quickly that you wouldn't expect to find it in the fossil record, which
that's not at all what he said.
Indeed.
That's not what he said at all, actually.
This hopeful monster hypothesis had been proposed
Pause.
previously by...
Pause. Okay, hopeful monster is a totally different idea in evolution, which creationists routinely confuse with punctuated equilibrium. But punctuated equilibrium has nothing to do with the hopeful monster idea. Hopeful monster was a concept invented in the 1940s by Richard Goldschmidt, who was another biologist who's a geneticist. Macroevolution isn't real because they've redefined macroevolution and lied from DM. Speciation isn't macroevolution wing. Yeah, no, the hopeful monster idea. So remember back to what I said. Punctuated equilibrium is a matter of taking allopatric speciation and applying it to the fossil record. By and large, that's what punctuated equilibrium is. Okay. Hopeful monster was an idea that speciation existed or proceeded almost entirely by like giant mutational jumps, which Gould didn't require. Gould did not require. Now, he did say it happened. Part of Gould's idea was that there were the genomic revolutions, which Zach mentioned earlier. So it can happen, but Hopeful Monster basically required that it happened. So Goldschmidt was part of a camp that was that sort of earlier on in the modern synthesis was like speciation wasn't the result of a bunch of small genetic changes piling up together. Speciation was the result of these large mutational leaps. Yuri Filipchenko, who was the Russian entomologist who coined the terms micro and macroevolution back in 1927, also held to this view. That's the reason we differentiate micro and macroevolution. That's really it. The reason is, and most people have forgotten the history, which is fine because it was 100 years ago at this point. The reason macroevolution includes speciation is speciation was thought to occur as a result of mechanisms separate from microevolution. So you have so microevolution is small genetic changes that then are driven to fixation or lost, as a result of natural or sexual selection. But macroevolution happened exclusively because of large mutational leaps that then could be driven to fixation by natural or sexual selection. So you didn't have just gradual accumulation of small changes leading up to speciation. You had really big changes leading to speciation. That's why we have that separation. And that's why speciation is included under macroevolution. Creationists who also don't know anything about the history of evolutionary theory, they are always trying to argue like, speciation is included under macroevolution because evolutionists just want the easy win. They want to shift goalposts. No, no, this precisely the opposite. It's actually, remember, young Earth creationism as it exists currently is a product of like the 1930s and 40s with George McCready Price and what's her name from the Seventh-day Adventist Church? I can't remember her name. I'm sure someone will put it in the live chat. But this young Earth creationism is a response to evolution, not the other way around. Or young Earth creationism, like creation science, and they want you to forget that. They want you to think that young Earth creationism, as it currently exists, has always been around, and evolution came later, but it's opposite. It is the opposite. So.
Well, and
anyway,
it's either that or they will say, well, yeah, you can say that speciation is included, but speciation isn't well defined either, because when you're talking to a creationist, speciation means a cat turning into a dog. That's speciation. That's what they think speciation is. You have to have a significantly different animal from one to the other. Otherwise, it's not speciation, then it's variation. And I'm so tired of hearing all of that.
And the funny thing is about that, Peter, is I think speciation is perfectly well defined, right? Speciation just means a change from one species to another. Species, on the other hand, I think is not necessarily always well defined.
It's also pretty hard to define, because the entire everything that is alive is on a spectrum. It is constantly moving, and it's us trying to create the boxes to put the different species into. So how are you going to make a definition to where to draw the line? It's pretty hard to do. Right.
No, I agree. Smitty, didn't geology face opposition from young Earth creationists before evolution? Sort of. Yes and no. So you could say there were young Earth creationists, like you had Bishop Ussher in the 1600s who, said the Earth is about 6,000 years old, but this was a pretty fringe position. Like, most theologians did not read the Bible that way. They did not read it as you have to take it completely literally. That was a very fringe and probably a heresy for a while. I don't know if ask Dapper, but that was probably a heresy at some point. But then later, following like the Civil War, when you had the evangelicals, or sorry, the Baptists, and in the South, who wanted to separate themselves theologically from the Baptists in the North, and then you had the Seventh-day Adventists, and then George McCready Price. These groups started congealing in the 20s and 30s and into the 40s, based in part on like theological divisions, during or following the Civil War, and also because probably also because they were they felt threatened by the scientific community. Everything's a heresy. Yeah, you're probably right.
Mhm.
Now there was a time when believing that like the global flood happened was fine, but you didn't have to believe in a young Earth to believe that the global flood happened, right? You could say, okay, well, the global flood happened 4,000 years ago, but the Earth is way older than that, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But it's the creation science as we understand it now, where the Earth has to be 6,000 to 10,000 years old. The global flood definitely happened 4,000 years ago. Tower of Babel, everything in the Bible we should take literally. Like this is a fairly recent invention,
If
and they
only
want
there,
you to forget that.
if only there were somewhere in the Bible that God is not the author of confusion. That would just. Oh wait, sorry.
Yeah.
Continue.
Yes.
Other atheist types like Bertrand Russell, claiming that perhaps large-scale sudden changes could develop through the power of X-rays and altered genes. Otto Schindewolf developed these ideas in the 1930s, and they were also promoted in the 40s by Richard Goldschmidt. But to most, it seemed absurd and immature, almost comic bookish in its presentation. Kind of like gamma rays somehow turning the fictional Dr. Bruce Banner into the Incredible Hulk in a sudden transformation.
Well,
it looked good in comic book.
Pause. Well, again, like macromutations still do happen, right? No one's saying they don't. This is so stupid. Okay. No one's saying macromutations like whole genome duplications, for instance, or translocations or inversions. No one's saying these things don't happen. We're saying they are not the primary mechanism of evolution. That is what we're saying. That was Goldschmidt's claim, that these genomic revolutions are the primary means by which macroevolution happens. We're not saying they don't happen. We're just saying it's not the major mode of evolution. That's what we're saying. But of course, for Calvin, there's no nuance. He doesn't. I'm sure he doesn't know.
Every mechanism mentioned is a major mechanism, or it isn't any mechanism. There's no middle way. It's either 100% or nothing.
All or nothing.
Yes.
Yep. Nope. No middle ground. Nothing. There's no nuance. None of that. Get that nuance out of here.
Okay.
Fiction, but like all evolutionary ideas, it made for poor science. For example, Schindewolf proposed that the major evolutionary...
It made for poor science. I recently read something here in the Netherlands where people can't wait to study after the whole ruckus is over in Russia, in Pripyat, where the nuclear plant accident was, because there are lots of new species in the cordoned off part of the land where no one was allowed. So it isn't that far fetched. There are animals living there.
Do you remember, Peter? A while back, there was a big to-do about the fungi that like absorb radiation.
I do slightly
remember hearing about that.
Yeah, I do slightly recall.
I haven't read a whole lot about it, but I remember like hearing about it and how that was like pretty cool that these fungi were absorbing radiation. pretty wild.
Mhm.
I think it was through like the pigment in their thallus. So yeah, I mean that's cool, right? And they're using the radiation for metabolism, what have you. But no, Peter, it's not real. None of it's real.
None of it's real.
Nope, none of it's real. Nothing's real. Evolution's a lie.
We can't have
Peppered
nice
moths are a lie.
Yeah, we can't have nice things when these people are around. Everything's a lie, except for one book, which is demonstrably false. But that's not a lie.
Transformations must have occurred in single large steps, such as a reptile laying an egg from which a bird hatched. The sheer absurdity in the suggestion that macromutations might cause major evolutionary transformations between kinds of creatures instead of a more gradual process was why it was widely mocked, hence the name the hopeful monster hypothesis. Regardless, Gould's stature and the much more scientifically sounding punctuated equilibrium terminology certainly helped this new story of evolution to be promoted more vigorously. And the admission to why it was being proposed was promoted as well, much to the horror of many of their fellow atheist and evolution believers. The general preference that so many of us hold for gradualism is a metaphysical stance embedded in the modern history of Western cultures. It is not a high-order empirical observation induced from the objective study of nature.
Again,
phyletic gradualism.
Oh, it was an a priori assertion. It was from the start. It was never seen. The rock was expressed. Yeah. Okay. All right. Again, Gould kind of went overboard with his attacks on gradualism, but in some cases, you can see the point that he's trying to make. With not all of these are. You can't always see like a strict phyletic gradualism, or a strict demonstration of phyletic gradualism in like the fossil record of everything, and that's fine. I'm sure it's the case that punctuated equilibrium occurs sometimes and phyletic gradualism occurs other times. Like these things both occur. It's not one or the other. It's both. Yeah, and this is more just. I mean, I'm sure Gould believed this when he said it, but whatever.
I have to criticize Icarus. He said paper kills moth. That's not the fact. Pepper kills moth, especially in the UK.
Maybe the salt kills them.
Yeah,
salt and pepper.
But the music is becoming very dramatic, so I'm expecting someone's going to die in the next few seconds.
Well, we can only hope, but I think the music gets more dramatic the less of an argument he has. So that would explain why it's getting so dramatic now.
Even the people who were responsible for the music thought, this is so sad what he's saying right now. We have to emphasize this. This is so incredibly sad and worrying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was an a priori assertion from the start. It was never seen in the rocks. It expressed the cultural and political biases of the 19th century liberalism. What Gould was willing to admit is that the story of evolution itself, based on an anti-God bias, drove conclusions that were not represented by a simple examination of the facts. He was willing to admit that gradualism was an a priori assertion based on a metaphysical stance. In other words, the story of gradualistic evolution is true. So we'll interpret any evidence we find according to that view, regardless of whether it supports that concept or not.
That's literally not what he said.
With Gould's passing, the championing of punctuated equilibrium among the evolutionary community has died down considerably. And no doubt this breaking of the ranks by such a distinguished member of the evolutionary community and the frank admissions that he made were quite embarrassing to the cause of naturalism. So as the new guard of naturalists, represented by the likes of Professor Richard Dawkins, came along, the promoting of the more gradualistic method of evolution.
Pause. the the new guard of evolution, like Richard Dawkins, the guy who fought Gould in the 70s, that Richard Dawkins. Are you kidding me? The guy whose first book came out before. What did Selfish Gene come out? Was that 76?
I
Was
don't
that
know.
1976? The Selfish Gene. What year did Selfish Gene come out? I think it was 76. 76, yeah. Okay. The Selfish Gene was published before Gould and Eldridge's first paper on punctuated equilibrium was. And I love that he's saying, yes, new people like Richard Dawkins, not old people like Richard Dawkins. Oh my god. Man. Dawkins is okay, so Dawkins, again, if you read his work, like The Blind Watchmaker, he's not opposed to like the bones of punctuated equilibrium, right? Punctuated equilibrium is fine by and large. Okay. The problem that Dawkins largely has with Gould is one part of Gould's presentation of gradualism, as well as proclaiming that that punctuated equilibrium, like, is like a game changer for evolutionary theory. Those are the problems that Dawkins had. Not that punctuated equilibrium isn't real, not that allopatric speciation doesn't occur in the fossil record. Silly. Very silly. Also, yeah, did Calvin Smith really not notice Bigfoot sneaking up right behind him? How did he not see that?
Remember when
this man has no peripheral senses whatsoever.
Remember at the start of the show when we talked about a certain guy with a toothbrush mustache?
Yeah.
Notice the hairdo that Bigfoot has. Just saying.
I don't think I did. The spry young lad, Richard Dawkins, at like 85 years old. Yeah, exactly. Basically, yes. Anyway, okay.
Shall we let him?
Yes.
Meet his maker.
Mm-hmm.
And resumed. The only problem was that Gould's assessment was still correct. Facts observed from the fossil record simply did not support the story. Once again, many evolutionists might posit that Gould, as legendary and gifted as he was speaking from a position of ignorance, because even 100 years after Darwin, science had simply not collected enough data.
What?
And yet, in 2004, National Geographic admitted, illuminating but spotty, the fossil record is like a film of evolution, from which 999 out of 1,000 frames have been lost.
Pause. No, that's a perfectly fine quote. That's correct. Yes, that's true. What is the problem? This is correct. When the fossil record, when you get down to like, okay, we have like a sediment, we have, a section of like strata, and each stratum is like, I don't know, 25,000 years from the one above and below it. That's really good, actually. Wow. We're getting pretty close with that. You don't find that in a lot of places. We don't get that good a record of fossilization typically. Well, Jamie E., the reason that Calvin Smith does not realize gradualism and punctuated equilibrium are not mutually exclusive is the same reason no creationists do. Their paycheck depends on it.
Yeah.
There are not a single creationist I've ever seen who acknowledges that these two processes can act in parallel. Not one. They all think, every single one of them, that it's one or the other. That it's gradualism, and then punctuated equilibrium came along and destroyed gradualism. And what, now we just have gone back to gradualism, I guess? I don't know. That's kind of what Calvin Smith said, which again is silly. It's not one or the other. It's both. They are both correct in their own ways. Yep.
Okay. I think we're almost done. So
Okay.
Not going to be long
good.
anymore.
Think about it. How would you like to watch a film where 999 out of 1,000 frames were gone? You wouldn't see much of a show, would you? The fact is, they're confessing exactly what
but what if
said,
it's a million?
that
What if it's a million total frames?
Yeah.
If it's a million total frames, you'd get, again, you wouldn't get a whole lot out of it, but you'd get part of it. What if it's, like a billion frames? Okay, well, you get a pretty decent amount out of it, right? I mean, you have to remember, you have to think of how many, total frames there are. If it's only 1 out of 1,000, yeah, that's not great. But when you have, a million frames, well, okay, that's substantial. Or a billion frames, okay, that's quite a bit more substantial. So, yeah.
And keep in mind, the guy saying this has literally nothing, no frame from, let's say, some plants from the Garden of Eden or traces from the Exodus. Nothing. It's not that 999 are missing. Everything's missing. But it's only important when it's evolution. That's literally the only thing where they need to have all the evidence or it's not going to count. We're not allowed to take it on faith, Jackson. Face it.
9% of the fossil evidence for evolution is missing. The fossil record does not exhibit a finely graduated chain of creatures evolving through time. What the fossil record shows is fully formed, distinct types of creatures buried together.
Nope.
All animals and plants
I mean, what does that even mean?
In the fossil record.
What is it?
And are not preceded by continuous transitional stages. Which
Really?
is great evidence that these creatures were created, fully formed, and later buried rapidly in the Great Deluge. All described.
I love
in the
how.
book of Genesis.
I love how we go from punctuated equilibrium is not an adequate explanation of the process of evolution to, therefore, the Earth is 6,000 years old, everything was buried in a global flood, and God is real. Goodbye. Good night. No, I'm not going to give you citations for any of that. Goodbye.
And what I don't get is, what's with the fully formed? Every fossil in the fossil record
look like?
is a fully formed animal. We may not have all the parts, but it's still a fully formed animal. It wasn't an animal that was missing half a leg or half a wing.
Peter, you see, there are in the fossil record elephants that are only like the top 50%.
Mm-hmm.
They're just kind of crawling around in the fossil record. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no... The first elephants were only like 10% of an elephant. And then they've later evolved into 20%. And so on until now we have 100% elephants.
This is a serious thing with people like that. Because you can't have half a wing. You can't have half a leg when it comes to the earlier land mammals.
Yeah.
You can, but it's not going to look the way you think it's looking. And this is...
I mean, that's the thing, right? They literally don't conceptualize what a transition might look like. They can't conceptualize it.
Although I think they can, but this is just making up stuff. So their gullible believers will follow them and send them money. I mean, look at the Ark Encounter in the Creation Museum. God gets all the glory. Kingham gets all the money.
Right. I mean, you have to think about, if you think about to go back to RJ's example of the reptile mammal transition. Creationists think the reptile mammal transition occurred with the movement of the ear bones from the jaw to the inner ear by reptiles having functional jaw bones And then for millions of years, they didn't have these functional jaw bones or inner ear bones. And then suddenly the ear bones became functional again. Right? That's what they think, because they literally can't conceptualize that the bones from the jaw, the articular and quadrate, were still functional as, or were sound collecting apparatuses while they were part of the jaw.
Mm-hmm.
And as they moved up the entire time, going from the jaw up to the ear, the entire time they were conducting sound. They never stopped conducting sound at any point. They were always functional in that ability. But creationists literally can't conceptualize that. They can't conceptualize things being functional the entire time.
Jackson,
It has to be all or nothing.
This is a kind, I'm going to use the word, a kind of people that brought us people like some banana guy who famously said,
true.
So now you evolved as a dog. And so here you are, a fully formed dog. But what if Mrs. Dog hasn't evolved yet? What are you going to do? You're going to die out.
Yeah.
Doesn't work. Because obviously species evolve one by one. This is how bad it is.
They evolve from a pound of hamburger into a single male individual, and then a single female individual has to come along later. Yeah. No, it's genuinely insane. Same for like the eye. You know, the opsins that we use in our eyes to detect light are used by other organisms. I mean, not the same type of opsin, it's in the same gene family. Are used by other things like bacteria and archaeans, which don't do sight in any real capacity. But the opsins are not used for sight. They're used for ion pumps. So you use your ion pump if it's during the day, and then you turn it off at night, right? There are no photons hitting you, so you're not doing your ion pumping. So there was never not a time when this when these proteins were not being used, for light light gathering. But they were being used for it in a different manner. But again, these are complicated topics that
I love the phrasing, by the way.
Are generally not interested.
I can see the Christian mother running up the stairs. There will be no iron pumping in your bed, mister. Not gonna happen. Read your Bible.
Hey, what, idle hands are the devil's what's the term? What's the phrase? Devil's playground or whatever? I don't remember. Anyway.
I don't know. Jackson,
like
we wouldn't know about those hands. We have other interests.
Not us.
No. we wouldn't. So
opsins are nerve cells. No, opsins are the proteins that photoreceptors have in them, and then the photoreceptors transmit they transduct the information, if you will, from the opsin changes conformation as a result of photons hitting it, and then this passes an electrical signal ultimately to nerves into the brain, which is the sensation of seeing. Devil's playthings. There we go. Thank you, Jamie E. Always coming in clutch for me. So yeah. That's basically what opsins are. Idle hand to the devil's workshop. Yeah, or the devil's playthings. Yeah. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. This is why I have you guys, because I cannot remember things.
Yeah. Exactly.
Correct. This is why we have chat.
Okay, well, 37 seconds. 37 seconds. Come on,
I
Bigfoot.
think that's the end of the video.
You can do it.
Do we want to watch the end?
Yeah, that's a guy in a mask.
Wait a minute, that isn't Bigfoot. I thought we were gonna see Bigfoot.
You know who that was, Jackson?
Who was that?
That was Piltdown Man.
I think so. It's Piltdown Man.
Okay.
That was
yeah,
something.
we don't have to.
Wild.
We don't have
Their
to. Their
citations are all Wikipedia. I love that their citation is Wikipedia and they still got the idea wrong. Like Wikipedia is a really good source, and I'm sure it explains. Punctuated equilibrium very well. But I'm also sure they read it and went, nah, screw that.
Okay.
Why is Bigfoot wearing a backpack? Questions we will never get answers to, Jamie.
That's what the rest of the pies are in. I mean, you have to have a snack.
Do we still have?
Yeah, we've got 20. We've got a little over half an hour left.
Like 34 minutes. Yeah.
So
can we do Discover You?
Back to school?
Yeah, let's go back to school. I don't remember where. Oh, is this where we were?
This is where we were.
Oh, this makes me sad again.
I see that I have to extend the bottom.
Just looking at this makes me sad. We went from something that was like, mildly entertaining, even if it was totally wrong, to...
Wait a minute. So Jake Nelson said it looked like Ken Ham to me. Didn't you say last week that there was something wrong with Ken Ham and people were taking over?
Right, yeah.
He's evolved.
He's turned into Bigfoot?
He's evolving into Bigfoot. That's probably what it is.
What a tragedy.
And
what a way to go.
And he's obviously doing that so he can add Bigfoot to his zoo at the Ark Encounter. Because
wait, he'll be in his own zoo at the Ark Encounter?
Yes, because if Bigfoot is real, he had to have been on the Ark, right? With Mrs.
Right,
Bigfoot.
I guess that's true. Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh.
And
okay.
I did have a guest on my channel who would immediately say, well, where we got Bigfoot? That was when the Nephilim mated with gibbons. That's how we got Bigfoot. Because we got dinosaurs because the Nephilim mated with lizards. So there you go.
Ah, I see.
Ken Ham has gone feral. Wasn't that a long time ago?
Australopithecus versus Homo. Many evolutionary paleoanthropologists claim that the genus Australopithecus was ancestral to our genus Homo. Well, they still do because it still is. Australopithecus is paraphyletic to Homo. So, yeah. The most famous Australopithecine fossil is Lucy because 40% of her bones were uncovered, making her one of the most complete known fossils among early hominins.
Yeah, that's cool. That's not why she was famous though. Because 40%.
Why was she famous, Peter?
Because she was transitional. Because she had a hip between a pelvis between the apes and the humans, and she was bipedal, which was another thing. That was what she was famous for, not for the amount of bones that were uncovered.
Right, exactly. And we have found more. I'm sure we found more complete fossil specimens than her. But you're right. Her fame isn't because she's especially complete. Her fame comes from the fact that she is transitional. She has characteristics that are intermediate between us and other great apes. So yeah.
You could say
Australopithecines.
She was a missing link.
Dun dun dun.
Yeah.
While Australopithecines were capable of some upright walking, their long forelimbs and other traits also indicate they spent significant amounts of time in trees. Yeah, that's true. Cool. For example, one study found Lucy had the hands of a knuckle-walking ape and a body that was quite ape-like. Except that her pelvis, the foramen magnum, the feet. These are all bipedal structure. They all are bipeds. These all indicate bipedality, I should say. So you can say like, oh well, the fingers were indicative of a life in trees. Okay, yeah. Again, we're talking about transitional. They're focusing on the parts of her that were more like other apes, but they're ignoring all the parts of her that were more like humans. It's kind of like with Tiktaalik. They'll say, oh, well, here are all these fishy characteristics of Algisni also. Yeah, exactly right. The Hollywood sign is proof of the Nephilim. Exactly right. It's kind of like when they say, Tiktaalik was just a fish. Here are all these fish characteristics that Tiktaalik has. Okay, what about all the tetrapod characteristics that Tiktaalik had? Well, they're just not going to talk about them. It doesn't matter. Like the wrist, or having a head separate from the body. Like they're just not going to talk about these things. There are many other important differences between Australopithecines and humans. Yeah, they were a separate genus. There are differences between us and them. No one's arguing that. They were not identical. Otherwise, they would be Homo sapiens. That's how that works. Some have claimed Homo habilis was a link between the Australopithecines and Homo. Yeah, that's true. Again, that's pretty common. But studies have found that habilis is more similar to living apes than were other Australopithecines and should be classified within Australopithecus rather than Homo. Okay, again, this is a lie. Like, this is just a lie. When they say studies have found that habilis is more similar to living apes, what they mean is like just the inner ear. Like, that's it. Everything else about it is more similar to Homo than to Australopiths. Like, that's literally it. And we talked about this previously. They're taking a single feature, which is just this one aspect of the inner ear, and saying that this one single feature is more important than all of the other characteristics that Homo habilis has.
But it is, Jackson.
That's what they're saying.
It fits their narrative. That's why it's so important.
I mean, I guess so. I suppose so.
That is it.
The fact that some skulls might have intermediate brain sizes is inconsequential, since intelligence is determined by far more than mere brain organization. This has nothing. What? No, that's a complete non sequitur. That's not what the argument is at all. The point with brain size is that Australopiths, like extant apes, have a brain size that is about a third of extant humans. Right? Theirs is about a third the size of ours, their brain case. But when you look at like Homo habilis, Homo erectus, you see that brain case size increases. It increases, leading to us. Yeah. So, this has nothing to do with intelligence. I don't know what that's a reference to at all. It's just nonsense. Nonsensical. Okay. So basically in this section, they have ignored everything about Australopiths that links them with humans, focused on a couple of traits that are actually indicative of, the transitional nature of Australopiths, and then just kind of moved on, I guess.
Yes, because if it fits their narrative, there's nothing more to talk about. That's it.
Yep, that's it. Move along.
Yeah, nothing to see here.
Inner ear. DM Wing says inner ear is diagnostic in mammals. Biology departments the world over are full of drawers of inner ear bone after inner ear bone. I guess that's true. That's probably true. Okay. Number F. Leading scientists have recognized that there is a distinct gap between the ape-like Australopiths and the human-like members of Homo. Okay. There is like a little bit of a morphological gap, but again, remember, the gap is these The gap is not degree, or sorry, it's not type, it's degree. The gap is, well, okay, now for Australopiths, this bone is an inch longer than it is in Homo. Like, okay, I'm fine with that. I that really doesn't bother me. This has led some to propose a Big Bang theory of the origin of Homo. Again, no, not really. Some missing links have been found to be frauds or wrongly interpreted fossils. Piltdown Man was a forgery. Ramapithecus was constructed from only jaws and teeth and was probably
It had to be mentioned. Piltdown Man has to be mentioned. Has to be mentioned in every single article.
Hey,
about human
but they
evolution.
forgot Nebraska Man.
Yeah,
they forgot Nebraska Man. So how embarrassing for them. Ramapithecus was probably an extinct orangutan-like ape. Yeah, that's true. Okay, and so
I like
Artie was in.
I like number 3. I like number 3 because I'm a co-host.
Artie was in poor condition, overhyped by the media. Is this an argument?
I will tell him next week when he's co-hosting on my show. Oh, that's a different. That's a
condition.
Yeah, it's a different. Overhyped? That's a different Artie, right? Sorry.
Allegedly,
I misread. It's with a D.
I don't. It was in poor condition. Like, what does that have to do with anything? Literally, what does that have to do with absolutely anything at all? And overhyped by the media. Who cares? Who cares? What is this? What does this mean? This has nothing to do with its phylogenetic position. It's so silly. Okay. Artie, by the way, for anyone who's not aware, is less derived than the Australopiths. So basically, after the split between us and chimps, you have like Sahelanthropus, which is currently the most basally derived hominin that we know. Then Auroran is a little bit more derived, and then you have Ardipithecus, which is more derived than that. But this isn't an argument. It's dumb. There's nothing here to even refute. Okay, genetic evidence, part 3. Letter 3. Lacking clear fossil evidence to make their case for ape-human common ancestry, some evolutionists have turned to DNA. As though we didn't have DNA already or something, I guess. I don't know. A common argument is that human and ape DNA is 99% similar, and this shows we share a common ancestor. The 99% statistic is incorrect because human and chimp DNA similarity may be as low as 70%. Remember, this is a lie. This is like just a straight up lie. Erica blew this claim out of the water. The program that that Tompkins used to get this figure also showed that 2 identical genomes had like an 80% similarity. So it's very dumb. Such genetic comparisons are flawed because they typically only focus on differences in protein coding DNA and ignore differences in non-coding DNA. Again, false. We can do whole genome comparisons nowadays. It's just a lie. We can do whole genome comparisons. We don't have to rely on just protein coding DNA. This is, again, just a lie. Even if human chimp DNA is similar, that doesn't dictate that we share. I think indicate would make more sense than dictate, but whatever. That we share a common ancestor because the similarities could result from common design. Again, as we've said before, if your model makes no differentiation between like similarity and differences, then you don't have a model. You just have nothing. Okay. Chromosomal fusion. Oh boy, here we go. More lies about this one. Some evolutionists, some of them, not all of them, just some of them, like a minority, if you will. Cite fusion evidence. So basically, the Hollywood sign is proof of the Nephilim says that Tompkins was using a bugged version of Blast Then when Tompkins used the fixed version, he still messed it up. Then DM speciation isn't macroevolution wing says Tompkins' more recent claims are using a non-bugged version. He just uses garbage parameters and doesn't weight his results. Yeah, exactly right. Okay. And he'll do things like you don't need to weigh your results if you have big N. Yeah, so basically what Tompkins does is he'll take like small like sequences and say like, well, if we have low amounts of similarity between these small sequences, then that is equally as important as having, like large similarities between longer sequences, right? Like it doesn't make any sense. These things should not all have the same amount of importance when you're doing your sequencing. They should have the importance should be like proportional to their size or statistically relevant. So, but it's not. It just isn't. He does not care. Sorry. Some evolutionists cite fusion evidence of human chromosome 2 as evidence for human-ape common ancestry because human chromosome 2 has a structure to what one would expect if two chimpanzee chromosomes were fused together at their ends called telomeres. Okay.
And,
cool.
And centromeres.
Right, yeah. And also centromeres, yeah.
They forgot those. as if
no one is
Yeah, as if they just showed up right in the middle of the chromosome. Some new telomeres showed up. So that I mean that happens all the time, right?
They just pop up. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine. It's fine. I'm not even mad. It's fine. No one is claiming this fusion is how humans emerged from ape-like creatures. So even if our chromosomes are fused, all it would show is that at some point within our lineage, two chromosomes became fused. What?
Why?
Wait, hold on. Wait. Okay. I guess it needs to be explained what the importance of this is. I guess because they don't understand what the importance is.
That's the part they left out. So maybe it's still coming. So hold on. Let me scroll down just.
Okay, all right. Let's go down a little bit.
No, they left it out.
Nope. Okay. So basically, the point of the chromosome 2 fusion, why this is important evidence for our common ancestry with all the other great apes, is that all the other great apes except for us have 48 chromosomes. We only have 46 chromosomes. So, and chromosome 2 is way bigger than what you would expect. So some geneticists back in like the 70s, I think it was 70s or 80s, were like, that chromosome is probably the result of a fusion between two chromosomes, or technically a Robertsonian translocation rather than like a full head-on fusion or whatever. But at any rate, the point is simply that you have this like they were fused, right? So, well, I mean, they could say that. DM Wing says they fused after Adam and Eve. That's their apologetic. They could say that technically. That would be fine. Because I mean, let's be real. They ad hoc everything else. Why not this too? I mean, why not? Everything else is so completely ad hoc. So just throw it in. But basically the point of this, so we should expect to have these chromosomes still somewhere in us. Like they literally just can't disappear. They had to be somewhere else in us. And they were still there, or they are still there. They're just fused. That is an expectation of evolution. Now, remember, creationists argue vehemently that there is no fusion. Jeffrey Tompkins has argued this for years. On the Standing for Truth channel, they've been arguing this for a long time. There's no fusion. The fusion didn't happen. And now, right, thanks to people like Erica, Guts at Gibbon, the creationists are kind of on the back foot about this one. They're like, well, we don't think it's a fusion, but even if it is, it doesn't matter. Which is not the argument they were making previously. The argument was, there's no fusion. So which is it? Is there no fusion or isn't there? You can't have it both ways. You can't both.
Unless you're a creationist, Jackson, then you can even have it 3 different ways. Because
I guess that's true.
The other thing they also leave out, and could correct me if I'm wrong, in chromosome 2, in the 2 different parts, those are highly similar with chromosomes in ape DNA, right? Or am I?
Well, yeah, I mean,
that is the point that they're not mentioning here, because that might point to a fusion more than just telomeres showing up and leaving out the syndrome.
You would think, yeah, it's just a coincidence, right? That's actually a really good point. I hadn't even thought of that really, but it's like, the actual genes that are on the chromosomes, like when you compare them with chromosome, what is it, like 12, I think, or something like that, in like a chimp, are the homologous genes in chromosome 2 now? If the answer is yes, then they fused. If the answer is no, then they didn't fuse. I wonder if anyone actually looks at that. That's really interesting that you mentioned. I don't even know. Yeah.
Yeah, that's anyway. What I was looking for in the next part, and I don't see any of that being mentioned.
No, I don't actually think anyone ever covers it. I don't think. Maybe I'm wrong. Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think I ever hear anyone talk about it. They always focus on just the telomeres, and and they say like it's actually a functional gene, the fusion site. It's not a I feel kind of stupid actually now that I think about it. I feel really dumb, Peter. You made me feel really dumb now. I'm like, do they ever talk about it? Do they ever just look at the homologous genes on chromosome 2 and compare it to chromosome whichever from chimps?
And now you mentioned that it's never mentioned. I'm thinking I didn't notice that it's never mentioned. So I feel as dumb, even though I've made the point
everybody
that
in the side
left out.
Everybody in the side chat, are you guys aware of creationists ever talking about the homologous genes on chromosome 2? Because I'm not. I'm not aware of it. Do you guys know? Do they do that on like Standing for Truth? Because I don't watch their content. It's garbage. There's no point.
I don't watch that either. If there's something interesting on there, I'll wait until someone mirrors it because I'm not giving him the views.
That's so interesting. Crap. That's okay. I'm gonna ask Erica. I'm gonna ask Erica later. I'll send her a message and be like, "Hey, what are your thoughts on this?"
Yeah, Erica and I think RJ. If there has been a mention,
12.
RJ should know as well.
That's so interesting, fascinating. Okay. Anyways, okay. Wow. Huh. That's such a good point, Peter. I didn't even think about that. It's very interesting. Huh. That's a really good point. Okay. Human chromosomal fusion tells us nothing about whether our human lineage leads back to a common ancestor with apes. Again, we already dealt with this. The evidence for chromosomal fusion isn't as neat and tidy as is often claimed, since the alleged fusion point contains much less telomeric DNA than it should if 2 chromosomes were fused end to end. Again, like, yeah, what about... Okay, one, again, remember, there's a pseudogene. There's a telomere-specific pseudogene right next to, or in the middle of chromosome 2. It's right smack in the middle, right next to the telomere region. You're telling me that's a coincidence?
I do have a question about this, though. Something that I honestly don't know, and Arn bumped into this as well in a conversation. I forgot where exactly. But so there was a fusion at some point. And I think Arn brought up that even when you have a dominant gene, it doesn't mean that gets fixated in the population. Can you shed some light about on that? Because if from what I know, that if in a population, this mutation would happen, the individual with that mutation would still be able to interbreed with the rest of the population. That wouldn't be a problem, right? So, but even if it's not dominant, how does it get fixated?
Well, I mean, you can have like genetic drift, for instance. Well, I mean, if it's dominant and there's not selection for it to be fixed, then it's not going to go to fixation. I mean, especially if it's deleterious, it's going to be selected against, right? Or even genetic drift. You could just have, random fluctuations in the allelic distribution in a gene pool, and that could cause the dominant allele to not go to fixation either. That's just another reason. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, it's just something that I had never thought about, because in some conversation that Arn had was that the gene for 6 fingers is dominant, and yet it's not. It's nearly no one has 6 fingers. Another thing that
Well, I mean, again, there's probably selection against that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, completely off topic, but okay, let's continue.
No, you're fine. Yeah, it's okay. So how would they argue against that, though? I'm just out of sheer curiosity. Now that we're talking about it, how, like Jake Nelson, you're posting there, and Hollywood Sign, how would creationists argue against that? Right, like, if it is very obviously the genes that are on both chromosomes, right, that are now on the same chromosome in us, like they're on 2 separate chromosomes, chromosome 12 A and B in chimps, but they're both on human chromosome 2 in us. Isn't that just a slam dunk, like it's over argument?
That is probably
Am
why.
I wrong on that?
Yeah, that's probably why it doesn't get mentioned. Because that's exactly why I was looking for that, whether or not they're going to mention it and have a solution for that. Maybe it's just too much.
Yeah, like I'm genuinely asking, chat, do they ever talk about that? Because it seems like it'd be over as soon as you sequence chimp. Well, okay, yeah, but like, well, I don't. Could you even use the common designer argument? Because then you'd have to say like, well, God is really apparently deceptive, right? Like, it's not a fusion, but God put all the genes on the same chromosome, like that.
He accidentally
seems really deceptive.
He accidentally spilled the super glue while creating humans.
Right.
That's how this happens.
No, I don't think common designer would solve that, though.
No, it doesn't.
Because you could say, so common designer might, a common designer is a very dumb and bad argument for very many reasons, but it would make more sense if we had 48 just like all the other apes.
Yes.
Because at least then you could say it's common designer, right? We have the same number, we have all the same genes in all the same places, so common designer. That would at least make a degree of sense.
Yeah,
it doesn't make any sense.
This makes the argument even dumber. Because why would he do that?
Makes the argument,
There's no reason to do such a thing. I mean,
okay, Erica does, but creationists don't. Really? Okay, that's so fascinating. That's so interesting. Okay. Wow. All right. Well, anyways, okay. I'll finish this last one, then we'll cut it for today. At most, all the chromosomal fusion evidence does is reconfirm that humans and apes share similar genetics. This could be explained by common design. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. Except it can't, because unconstrained regions show a nested hierarchy, which evolution predicts, but common design doesn't, or intelligent design doesn't. So again, no, common designer does not explain anything at all. It's just an easy out.
Jackson, if you want, you can. I think you might be able to finish this because there's not a lot of left.
I mean that.
Well, I mean, we can cut it
we
here.
only have 5 minutes left. Yeah, I was just gonna say, we can say, well, yeah, we can go back to the 2 screens.
Okay.
So, Peter, what you got coming up in the near future?
Hopefully a show, because the last one got canceled twice now. So hopefully I'm gonna get a show, and I'm as I said, I forgot if I said it online or offline. I had a chat with Natalia Reagan, and I offered to help her with some live streaming. So probably going to see if I need to make some artwork, and who knows, maybe even another producer job. I don't know, but we'll see. It would seem like fun, and she wants to do live shows every once in a while, and she would like to have people from the science community. So I might be able to hook up a few people who can have an interesting talk.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. Nice.
But and then obviously we're still the shows here every Thursday, every Tuesday, Saturday, and Sunday on Orange Channel, except for this Saturday, because I think it's another Snake Appreciation Day. Arn is off buying even more snakes. I don't know.
Because he needs more snakes.
He needs more snakes. Well, he has one now that in time will be able to kill him, and has tried it on a live show.
Uh-oh.
You could see him curling around Arn's throat, and you could see that the pressure was building up, and yeah. So
that's fun.
I mean, but it's yeah, shows with Arn are always fun. So if I haven't caught us reading the Bible or even the Book of Mormon, which is even better because whoever wrote that had severe brain injury. There's no other way. The language used, it's horrific. But it's a lot of fun because of the panel that we have. So I urge people to check it out.
Yeah.
Oh, and you have a super chat.
For $10, thank you. Works in a landfill, but when Erica explains why these things make sense, I get it. If I can understand it, anyone can. That's Erica appreciation time right here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Erica is amazing. Her videos are amazing. I just want to point out, lest anyone forget, her very first appearance on YouTube was on this channel. Lest anyone forget.
Mm-hmm.
It was me. I'm the discoverer. I discover all the fresh, young, new talent. That's me. That's what I do. And then I make them famous, obviously. No, but Erica's videos are fantastic. They're hilarious. She does an amazing job of distilling oftentimes very complex topics into very manageable bite-sized pieces. And yeah, she's just great at what she does. It's DM speciation isn't macroevolution waiting for $2, and it came to pass.
Yes.
Also from the Book of Mormon,
which is my job. I have a counter on screen every time someone reads "It came to pass." I click another so we can count the "It came to passes." One thing I did want to say, because
how many are we at so far?
I don't know the grand total. The most we had in one chapter was, I think, 38.
That's a lot.
Yeah, a lot came to pass in that chapter. But there seems to be a chapter that has around 200. It's
That's
insane. But one thing I did want to say, because I do think you sell yourself a little bit short, and this is because maybe not everyone knows this, but you also write scripts for people who become famous with your scripts. I mean, it's
I don't know if they become famous on my scripts, but I have written now 3. This is my 3rd script for Professor Dave, and I am happy to say, like, it makes me feel good in a sense that, like, you know, when I do a script, and I do these in conjunction with other people, so it's not just me.
Mhm.
When I do a script, you know, like I did one in conjunction with Erica, and did one in conjunction with Dan, and then you know, we send these off to Professor Dave, and you know, his video gets like 600,000 views or 400,000 views, and that makes me feel really good also, because I'm like, yeah, that script that I put out there, it made, you know, got him all these views, and that, I mean, his, and obviously he has the face that is recognizable, he has the animation, which is also really good and everything, but it makes me feel really good, you know, to be part of that process, to contribute there. Jake Nelson, again, for $10. Thank you so much. We love you just as much, Jackson. That's why we're here. Am I right, Peter?
Yeah, exactly. And I want to add to this, because now I work with Arn an awful lot, and I do every once in a while mention what we're doing here on this channel, and he has a huge admiration for you as well. So that's,
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I've met a lot of really interesting and extraordinarily intelligent people in my time here on YouTube, and it has served me immensely. So I'm very glad to have met all the people.
Mr. ID.
Hey, Peter, the highs are high, but when the lows come around, darn are they lows, you know?
I recently rewatched that entire debate. In hindsight, it's still funny. Back then, it was terrifying to tell Arn
we were
what was going on.
chuckling the entire time that was happening. We were both muted. We're giggling like little girls for like 2 hours while Arn and Mr. ID are going at it. And even after Arn gets off, we're still giggling, you know, about it.
And I can't say it enough. That is where Arn earned my respect, when he said, when we came clean, we hooked you up with an idiot, basically. And he said, I gave my word that I'm going to be on the show, and I'm going to be on the show. Doesn't matter who the guest is, I'm going to be there. We're going to have a show.
He did do that.
That to me, yeah, that settled it, because not a lot of people who don't have as much time as the average person, and I do know that Arn is incredibly busy, still taking the time for basically something that is a complete waste of time. Yeah, that settled it for me.
Absolutely. Actually, DM Wing, I did not write any of the tour scripts. I'm not a biochem guy. I don't know anything about abiogenesis. That was not me. I've only written 3 so far. They are, or co-written, if you want to be more precise. I've co-written the Stephen Meyer. That was my first one. Gunter Beckley, and now Jonathan Wells. Those are the 3. I reviewed his Jonathan McClatchy. Oh, it's Nestlig. Yeah, we missed you. We missed you, Nestlig. We wished you could have been here. I reviewed his Jonathan McClatchy script, but I didn't write it. But that's it. I have not done any of the tour stuff. That's not me. Yeah. So anyway, all right. Well, we're past the hour now. Sorry, Nestlig. We wish you could have been here with us. We'll look forward to next week then. And thank you everybody who you know is here in the live chat. Thank you for watching, and we will see all of you next time.
See you next week. Bye.